Hey, so tonight we're going to talk about what everyday life was really like in medieval Britain. And trust me, by the time we're done here, you're going to be so grateful for that mattress under you, those clean sheets, that roof over your head that doesn't leak. We're talking about a time when 80% of people were peasants. 80%. Think about that for a second. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. All right, find that cozy spot. Take a nice, slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to medieval Britain, somewhere around the 1300s. So congratulations, you just woke up in medieval Britain. The first thing you notice isn't what you see, it's what you smell. Smoke. Thick, choking wood smoke that makes your eyes water. It's seeping down from the hole in the thatch roof above you, where yesterday's fire still smoulders in the centre of your one-room cottage. The air is heavy with it, dense. You're lying on a thin straw mattress that's more lumps than comfort. The straw pokes through the coarse linen ticking, jabbing into your back and shoulders. It crackles when you move. Underneath it, you can feel the hard-packed earth floor, cold and unforgiving. The mattress does almost nothing to cushion you from it. Your covering is a rough wool blanket, scratchy against your skin. It smells of sheep and smoke and, well, you. Bathing isn't exactly a weekly thing here. The wool is thick but drafty. Cold air slips through gaps where the weaving isn't tight. One corner is damp from where rain dripped through the thatch last night. You shift slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position. Better. That's a bit better. The cottage is dim. No windows, just gaps in the wattle and daub walls that let in slivers of grey morning light. Wattle and daub, basically woven sticks plastered with mud and cow dung. The walls are thin, maybe 3 inches thick. You can hear wind whistling through the cracks. In winter, those cracks let in snow. Right now, they're just letting in the sound of your neighbour's rooster and the distant lowing of cattle. Speaking of cattle, there's snuffling and shuffling from the other end of your cottage. Your ox, your 2 sheep, and that one scraggly chicken that somehow survived the winter are all sharing this space with you. The smell hits you. Animal sweat, manure, wet straw. It's pungent. Really pungent, but these animals, they're keeping you alive. The ox pulls your plough, the sheep give you wool to trade, the chicken gives you eggs when she feels like it. Your family is still asleep around you. Medieval families didn't sleep alone. Privacy wasn't really a thing yet. Your wife is next to you, your 3 surviving children arranged by age, youngest closest to their mother. Everyone's huddled together for warmth. Shared body heat is sometimes the difference between making it through the night or not. You yawn, a big, satisfying yawn that stretches your jaw. Your muscles are already aching. Yesterday was spent behind the plough, walking those long furrows in the Lord's field. Today will be more of the same, but first you've got to get that fire going properly. The fire pit in the centre of the room is just glowing coals now. You can see your breath in the cold air. You need to get some kindling on those coals, get some flames going, warm the place up, and you need to do it before the smoke gets any thicker. The hole in the roof above helps, but not much. Sometimes you wonder if the smoke is trying to kill you faster than the cold. Here's the thing about being a peasant in medieval Britain, and this is going to sound weird, but you're not necessarily poor. Well, okay, you are poor by our standards, but there are different kinds of peasants. Some peasants, believe it or not, are doing pretty well for themselves. You, for instance, you're what they call a villain. You're semi-free. You rent land from the lord of the manor, and yeah, you can't just pack up and leave whenever you want, but you're not exactly a slave either. You've got some rights. The lord can't just kick you off your land. It's yours, as long as you pay your rent and work his fields when he needs you to. Now your neighbour down the way, he's a serf, poor bastard. He's basically tied to the land like property. If the Lord sells the manor, he sells the serf with it. But here's the weird thing. Even the serf has some security. The Lord can't kick him out either. Strange system. But there you go. And then there are the free peasants. Lucky bastards can go wherever they want, work for whoever pays best. Some of them are actually getting rich, really rich, especially if they're in the wool trade. See, here's what's happening in medieval Britain that's actually pretty amazing. There are all these new technologies coming in, stuff the Romans never figured out. The heavy plough, for instance. This thing can slice through the thick, clay-heavy soil of northern Europe like nobody's business. Before this, you basically couldn't farm half the land here. Too heavy, too thick. Now you can feed way more people. You stretch, feeling your back pop, your shoulders drop, releasing some of that tension from yesterday's work. Nice and easy. There's also this thing called the three-field system. Brilliant, really. Instead of just farming the same crops over and over until you suck all the nutrients out of the soil, you rotate. One year you grow wheat or barley, crops that pull nitrogen out of the soil. Next year, you let that field rest, go fallow. Third year, you plant something like alfalfa or beans that puts nitrogen back into the soil. Then you start the cycle over. It means you can actually farm more land more efficiently, feed more people, which is good because there are a lot more people to feed these days. And then there's the horse collar. Sounds boring, but this thing changed everything. Used to be you had to use oxen to pull your plough. Oxen are strong, sure, but they're slow as hell. Horses are much faster, but if you try to make a horse pull a heavy plough with the wrong kind of harness, you'll choke the poor thing to death. The horse collar fixes that. Now horses can pull ploughs without suffocating. They're faster than oxen, so you can plough more land in less time. They're useful for other stuff too. Transportation, hauling goods to market, multi-purpose animals, very efficient. You want to get a comfortable yawn and settle a bit deeper into your straw mattress. It's not so bad really once you find the right position. These innovations, they're making life better for peasants. Well, some peasants. If you're smart about it, if you work hard, if you get a little lucky, you can actually improve your situation. Take the Collins family, for example. Thomas Collins, he's a peasant just like you, but by the 1270s he's doing really well for himself, really well. He owns about 15 acres of land, which is a lot for a peasant. He's got cattle, sheep, geese, especially geese, because rich people love eating goose at Christmas. So, there's good money in geese. His wife brews ale, which she sells at market. They're basically what you'd call middle class, if that concept existed yet. Thomas isn't just getting by, he's actually respected in his community. People come to him when they need someone to vouch for them, to be a pledge. If someone owes money and they say they're good for it, Thomas will say, "Yeah, I know this guy. He's trustworthy. I'll put up my land as security." That's a big deal. That means people trust you. That means you've got something to lose. But here's the thing about medieval life. It can all change really fast. One bad harvest, one sick animal, one stupid decision, and everything you've built can crumble. The fire pops and crackles in the centre of the room. The smoke shifts, and for a moment you can breathe easier. Your breathing naturally slows. In and out. That's better. See, around 1282, we lose track of Thomas Collins in the records for about 10 years. When he shows up again in 1292, his luck has turned bad, really bad. This guy who used to be well respected, who used to have people coming to him for help, now he's the one who needs help. He owes money. A lot of money, 5 shillings to a guy named Walter from Oldbury. 5 shillings might not sound like much, but for Thomas, it's a crisis. He can't pay it back. He's already mortgaged his crops, basically promised his entire harvest to someone else to pay off other debts. He's stuck. So, what does he do? He has to sell his land. But here's the catch. He doesn't actually own his land. He's a serf, remember. The abbey owns the land, so he can only sell it to the abbey, and the abbey knows he's desperate, so they're not exactly going to give him top dollar for it. They give him £2. It's enough to pay off Walter and his other debts, but now Thomas is in real trouble. He's got 9 mouths to feed, him, his wife and 7 children, and he's just lost most of his income. All he's got left is the land his wife brought into the marriage as her dowry. And here's something interesting. Even in medieval times, women had some property rights. The land that came with his wife as part of her dowry, that's still hers. Thomas can't sell it without her permission. It's not much, but it's something. Your wife stirs beside you, mumbling something in her sleep. You listen to her breathing, slow and steady, peaceful. The children are still fast asleep, bundled together like puppies. Thomas tries to make it work, he really does, but by the time he dies in 1312, he's massively in debt again. His land goes to his wife and daughters. 2 of the daughters have managed to get married, which is good for them. Marriage means security, someone to take care of them, but that leaves 6 women who need to support themselves somehow. By 1319, all the Collins sisters are gone, just vanished from the records. We don't know if they moved away looking for better opportunities or if something worse happened to them. See, from 1317 to 1319, there was this disaster called the Great Famine. The name pretty much tells you everything you need to know. There just wasn't enough food to go around. The medieval warm period, this stretch of time from about 900 to 1300, when the weather was actually really good for farming, that was ending. Winters were getting longer and colder. Summers were getting shorter and rainier. Crops were failing. People were starving. A lot of people. The Collins sisters might have been among them. You shift again, getting more comfortable as the story continues. The straw rustles beneath you, but you barely notice anymore. You're settling in, getting cozy. This is the reality of medieval life. It's not all knights and castles and romantic nonsense. It's ordinary people trying to make a living, trying to feed their families, trying to survive in a world that can be pretty brutal. Most people, 80% of people, are peasants. They're the ones doing the actual work that keeps society functioning. They're growing the food that feeds everyone. They're raising the animals. They're making the cloth, brewing the ale, building the houses. Everything depends on them, but they're also the ones who have the least control over their own lives. You can't just decide you don't like your lord and move somewhere else. You can't just say, I'm tired of farming, I think I'll become a merchant. Your life is tied to the land, and the land is controlled by someone else. Someone who's never held a plough, never planted a seed, never spent 14 hours a day in the fields. And yet there are opportunities, real opportunities, if you're smart, if you work hard, if you specialise in something people need. Brewing, for instance, weaving, the wool trade. England is becoming a major player in the international wool trade. There's this thing called the Hanseatic League, a network of trading cities around the North Sea and Baltic Sea that trade in wool and cloth. English wool is some of the best in the world. Sheep produce this miracle fibre that stays warm even when it's wet. That's not nothing when you live in a place where it rains 9 months out of the year. A comfortable sigh escapes as you think about the sheep in the corner of your cottage. Even their assets, even they represent opportunity. If you're a peasant with enough land to graze sheep, if you know how to breed them properly, if you can get your wool to market, you can make good money. Really good money. Some peasants are getting rich off the wool trade. Rich enough to buy better houses, better land, better lives for their children. But you've got to be careful. You've got to be smart, because the same system that can lift you up can crush you just as easily. The fire settles with a soft whoosh. The smoke drifts lazily upward, and you watch it disappear through the hole in the roof. Your eyelids feel heavy. Not sleepy exactly, just relaxed, comfortable. The church wants its cut of everything. 10% of everything you produce goes to the church as tithe. Doesn't matter if you barely have enough to feed your family. Doesn't matter if the harvest was bad. 10%, no exceptions. And then there's your Lord. You owe him labour, you owe him rent, you owe him a share of your crops, and if he decides he needs more, well, that's just too bad for you. This is the world you've woken up in. This is medieval Britain. It's a world where 80% of people live like this, in one-room cottages, sharing space with animals, working land they don't own for people who've never worked a day in their lives. But it's also a world on the verge of change, big change. The Black Death is coming. Well, it already came about 30 years ago, and it killed a third of the population. A third. Imagine that. 1 out of every 3 people you know, dead within a few years. But here's the weird thing about the Black Death. For the peasants who survived, it was actually kind of good news. Suddenly there weren't enough people to work the land. Suddenly peasants had leverage. If you didn't like the deal your lord was offering, you could go work for someone else who would pay you better. The government tried to stop this, of course. They passed laws saying peasants couldn't demand higher wages, couldn't move around looking for better work. But laws are one thing, reality is another. If there's only half as many workers as you need, you're going to pay whatever it takes to get the work done. Your muscles relax as you shift position, finding that perfect spot where the straw doesn't poke quite so much. The animal sounds from the other end of the cottage are comforting now, familiar, safe. So now we're in this interesting period where peasants are starting to realise they have power. Real power. They're the ones doing the work. They're the ones creating the wealth, and they're starting to ask questions. Why should they give half their crops to some lord who's never held a plough? Why should they work for free on the lord's land when they could be working their own? Why should they be tied to one place when there are opportunities elsewhere? These are dangerous questions. The kind of questions that make the people in charge very nervous. And there's this priest, John Ball, who's been going around giving sermons that make the authorities even more nervous. He's asking questions like, when Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? Think about that for a second. Adam and Eve didn't have nobles and peasants. They were just people. So where did all this hierarchy come from? Who decided that some people should be born to wealth and power while others should be born to serve? These are the kind of ideas that can start revolutions. You yawn again, a deep, satisfying yawn. The warmth from the fire is starting to reach you now, taking the edge off the morning chill. Your breathing slows and deepens. The thing is, medieval society depends on peasants not asking these questions. It depends on everyone accepting that this is just the way things are, the way God intended them to be. Nobles fight, priests pray, peasants work. Everyone has their place, their role, their station in life. But what happens when the peasants start to think maybe they deserve better? What happens when they realise they outnumber the nobles and priests by about 50 to 1? What happens when they decide they've had enough? Well, you're about to find out. Because it's 1381 now, and a tax collector just showed up in the village of Fobbing in Essex, demanding to know why the people there haven't paid their poll tax. This is a new tax, 4 pence from every adult, whether they're rich or poor. 4 pence might not sound like much, but when you're barely making enough to feed your family, 4 pence is a lot of money. The people of Fobbing have had enough. They've had enough of taxes, enough of lords, enough of being told they owe money to a government that's never done anything for them except take their food and their children for some war in France they don't understand and don't care about. So they throw the tax collector out. Just grab him and toss him out of town. Come back when you've got something useful to offer, they basically tell him. The government is not amused. They send soldiers to restore order, but the people of Fobbing do the same thing to the soldiers. Out they go, and word spreads, fast, village to village, county to county. People are saying no, people are standing up, people are refusing to pay. You stretch, feeling your back pop again. your shoulders settle. The tension in your neck melts away. Nice and easy. That's it. This is where our story really starts, not with knights or castles or kings, but with ordinary people like you, lying on straw mattresses in smoky cottages, deciding they've had enough, deciding they deserve better, deciding they're willing to fight for it, because what's about to happen will shake medieval England to its core. It'll bring peasants from all over the country marching on London. It'll put them face to face with the king himself. It'll change everything. Or at least, it'll try to. But first, you've got to get through another day of being a medieval peasant. You've got to get that fire going, feed those animals, work those fields. You've got to survive in a world that doesn't care whether you live or die, as long as the crops get planted and the rent gets paid. You shift a bit more, getting comfortable, muscles relaxing, as the morning light grows stronger and the sounds of the village waking up drift through the thin walls of your cottage. So you drag yourself up from that straw mattress, bare feet hitting the cold earth floor. The shock of it wakes you up fast. Medieval Britain doesn't believe in easing into your day. It's cold, it's harsh, and it's immediate. Your first job is getting that fire going properly. You crouch down by the fire pit, blowing gently on the coals until they glow brighter. Add some dry grass, some twigs, watch the flames catch and grow. Smoke billows up, making your eyes water, but at least it's warm smoke. The animals are stirring now too. Your ox looks at you with those big patient eyes that seem to say, well, are we working today or what? The sheep are huddled together, their wool thick and greasy to the touch. That wool, by the way, is worth more than you might think. Good English wool can fetch serious money at market if you know how to get it there. You step outside to piss and the morning air hits you like a slap. It's spring, but spring in medieval Britain is still cold, still wet, still miserable half the time. The sun is just starting to break through the clouds, casting long shadows across the field strips. And that's what you see stretching out in front of you. Not neat square fields like we have today, but long, narrow strips. Your strips scattered across the village's 3 big fields. This is the open field system, and it's how pretty much everyone farms in medieval England. See, the lord of the manor doesn't divide up his land into nice, tidy farms for each peasant family. Instead, he's got 3 huge fields, and each peasant family gets strips scattered throughout all 3. Your neighbour might have the strip right next to yours in one field, but his other strips could be on the complete opposite side of the village. Sounds inefficient, right? Well, it's actually pretty smart. If one part of the village has better soil, or gets more rain, or doesn't flood as badly, everyone gets a piece of it. Spreads the risk around. If your strip next to the river gets washed out in a flood, well, you've still got strips on higher ground. You stretch, feeling your muscles wake up slowly. A yawn escapes. The morning is quiet except for the sounds of other families starting their day. Roosters crowing, pigs snorting, the distant sound of someone chopping wood. Today, you're working the Lord's land. That's how this whole system works. You don't just rent your strips, you owe labour to the Lord. A certain number of days per week, you work his land for free, plant his crops, harvest his grain, repair his fences. Only after you've done your work for him can you work your own strips. It's called corvée labour, and yeah, it's exactly as fun as it sounds. Free work for someone else while your own crops wait. But here's the thing that's starting to change in the late 1300s. There aren't enough people anymore to make this system work smoothly. The Black Death killed so many people that lords are getting desperate for workers. Some of them are starting to offer actual wages instead of just demanding free labour. Some are letting peasants pay money rent instead of working the Lord's land. And some peasants are saying, you know what, I think I'll go work for the lord down the road who's offering better terms, which technically they're not supposed to be able to do. Villeins and serfs are tied to the land, but when half the population is dead and you need to get your crops planted, you start to get flexible about the rules. You head back inside to grab some bread and ale for breakfast. The bread is dense, dark, made from barley and rye, with maybe a little wheat if you've been lucky. It's not fluffy white bread, it's heavy, chewy stuff that fills your stomach and gives you the energy to work 14-hour days. You dip it in the ale to soften it up. Medieval ale is weak, safer to drink than water, and it's got calories you need. Your wife is up now, getting the children moving. Medieval families don't have the luxury of sleeping in. Work starts early and ends late, especially during planting and harvest seasons. The children old enough to work will come with you to the fields. The youngest will stay with their mother, who's got her own work to do, tending the vegetable garden, feeding the chickens, maybe doing some weaving or brewing. Yeah, brewing. That's actually women's work in medieval England, and it can be profitable. Good ale is always in demand, and if your wife has a reputation for brewing strong, tasty ale, people will pay extra for it. It's one of those cottage industries that can actually make the difference between just surviving and getting ahead. You shift your weight, settling deeper into the rhythm of the story. Your breathing naturally slows as you listen. The walk to the Lord's Field takes you through the village, and you can see other families starting their day, smoke rising from thatch roofs, dogs barking, children running around with energy you remember having once upon a time. The village priest is up early too, heading toward the church for morning prayers. He waves at you, and you wave back. The relationship between peasants and the church is complicated. On one hand, the church takes that 10% tithe whether you can afford it or not. On the other hand, the priest is often the only person in the village who can read and write. He's the one who keeps track of births and deaths, who settles disputes, who provides what little medical care there is. And lately, some priests have been saying things that make the authorities nervous. Things about equality, about how God loves all people the same, about how maybe the social order isn't as fixed as everyone pretends it is. You reach the Lord's Field and see other peasants already at work. There's a rhythm to this work that's as old as farming itself. The ox is hitched to the heavy plough and you guide it down the long furrows, turning over the heavy clay soil that would have been impossible to farm before the heavy plough was invented. The plough bites deep, cutting through the earth with that satisfying resistance that tells you you're doing real work. The ox plods along steadily, patient and strong. Behind you, the earth lies open and dark, ready for seed. This is actually skilled work, you know. Guiding a plough isn't just a matter of walking behind it and hoping for the best. You have to know how deep to cut, how to handle the plough when you hit rocks or roots, how to keep the furrows straight and even. You have to understand your ox, know when to push and when to let up. You have to read the soil, the weather, the season. But does anyone acknowledge this skill? Do the nobles who live off your work understand what it takes to coax food from the earth? Of course not. To them, you're just another piece of equipment, like the plough or the ox. A comfortable sigh escapes as you imagine the rhythm of the work, the steady back and forth across the field. The sun climbs higher, and you settle into the meditative rhythm of ploughing. Step, step, step behind the ox. Watch the furrow open up, turn at the end of the field, start another row. Your muscles warm up, find their groove. This is what your body was built for. Not sitting at desks or staring at screens, but real physical work under the open sky. Around midday, you break for food. More bread, more ale, maybe some cheese if you're lucky. You sit in the shade of a hedgerow with the other peasants, and the talk turns to what it always turns to these days. Taxes. The poll tax is just the latest insult. 4 pence from every adult, rich or poor. A lord who owns half the county pays the same 4 pence as a peasant who can barely afford shoes. How is that fair? How is that just? Heard they threw the tax collector out of fobbing, one of the other peasants says, keeping his voice low. Just grabbed him and tossed him right out of town. Good for them, another one mutters. About time someone stood up to these bastards. You listen to this talk and you can feel something in the air, a tension, an anger that's been building for years and is finally starting to boil over. People are tired of being squeezed, tired of working harder for less, tired of watching their children go hungry while the Lord's family feast in their great hall. But there's also fear. Fear of what happens if you get caught talking like this. Fear of what happens if you're labelled a troublemaker. The Lord has the power to make your life hell if he wants to. He can evict you, take your animals, destroy everything you've worked for. Still, the talk continues. Quietly, carefully, but it continues. After the break, it's back to work. More ploughing, more walking behind the ox, more turning over the earth. The afternoon stretches long and hot. Your back aches, your legs are tired, but you keep going because that's what peasants do. You keep going. Your shoulders drop, releasing tension as you think about the simple rhythm of the work, the satisfaction of preparing the earth for new life. As the sun starts to get lower, you unhitch the ox and head back toward the village. The day's work on the Lord's land is done. Tomorrow you'll work your own strips, but today belonged to him. On the way back, you pass by the big barn that belongs to the abbey. It's huge, impressive, built of stone that will last for centuries. Inside, it houses the grain and animals that belong to the monks. The monks who spend their days praying for everyone's souls, including yours. You've never been inside that abbey, by the way, despite the fact that your labour helps pay for it, despite the fact that you give them 10% of everything you produce, you'll never see the inside. That's for monks and nobles, not for peasants. You can look at the great stone walls from the outside, but that's as close as you get. It's a reminder of how this world works. You create the wealth, but you don't get to enjoy it. You grow the food, but you don't get to eat the best of it. You build the buildings, but you don't get to live in them. And lately, more and more people are starting to ask, why? Back in your cottage, your wife has kept the fire going and prepared the evening meal. More bread, maybe some pottage, a thick stew made from whatever vegetables you've got, maybe a little meat if you're lucky. You eat by firelight, smoke still drifting up through the hole in the roof. The children tell you about their day. The older ones helped with the planting, the younger ones watched the animals, made sure they didn't wander off. Everyone contributes in a peasant family. Everyone has to. After the meal, there's still work to do. Tools to repair, animals to tend, preparations for tomorrow. Medieval peasants don't really have leisure time the way we think of it. When you're not working the land, you're doing something else that needs doing. But as the evening grows darker and the fire burns lower, there's time to talk. Time to share news from other villages, other counties. And the news these days is all about resistance. People refusing to pay taxes, villages throwing out government officials, peasants demanding better wages, better treatment, better lives for their children. There's a preacher named John Ball who's been going around giving sermons about equality, about how God created all people equal, how the differences between nobles and peasants are man-made, not God-made. Dangerous ideas, the kind of ideas that get you arrested. But they're spreading anyway, village to village, person to person, like seeds carried on the wind. You settle back against the wall, feeling the rough wattle and daub against your shoulders. The fire crackles softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Your wife mentions that she heard John Ball was in the next village over just last week. Drew a crowd of hundreds, they say, people walking miles just to hear him speak. And what he said was this: when Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? Think about that. Adam and Eve, the first humans according to the Bible. They worked the earth with their own hands. They spun their own cloth. They didn't have servants, didn't have peasants working for them. They were workers themselves. So when did it all change? When did some people decide they were too good to work, too important to get their hands dirty? When did nobles and bishops and lords decide that other people should do all the work while they lived in luxury? These are revolutionary questions, questions that challenge the entire structure of medieval society, questions that suggest maybe, just maybe, things don't have to be the way they've always been. Your breathing slows, natural and easy, as the fire burns lower and the cottage grows quieter. The word is spreading that something big is being planned, not just scattered resistance, not just individual villages throwing out tax collectors, something coordinated, something that could actually change things. They say peasants from all over Essex and Kent are talking to each other, sharing information, making plans. They say there's going to be a march on London, a gathering so big that even the king will have to listen. And the name people keep mentioning is Wat Tyler, a man from Kent who's supposedly organising this whole thing. Nobody knows much about him. Some say he's a roof tiler, others say he fought in France as a soldier, but everyone agrees he's got the kind of presence that makes people want to follow him. Tyler's message is simple. Peasants deserve better. They deserve fair wages, fair treatment, freedom to move and work where they choose. They deserve to be treated like human beings instead of property. It's not a complicated message, but it's a powerful one, especially when you're lying on a straw mattress in a smoky cottage, aching from a day of free labour for someone who's never held a plough. You shift position, getting more comfortable as the story flows around you like warm water. The children are asleep now, curled up together for warmth. Your wife is mending clothes by the firelight, her needle moving in steady, practised strokes. This is how peasant evenings end, with quiet work, quiet conversation, quiet preparation for tomorrow's labour. But tonight feels different. Tonight there's an electricity in the air, a sense that change is coming whether the nobles want it or not. Tonight you can almost imagine a world where peasants have rights, where workers get fair wages, where people aren't tied to the land like cattle. It's a dangerous dream, the kind of dream that can get you killed if the wrong people hear about it. But it's also a powerful dream, and it's spreading faster than anyone imagined. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the thatch above your head. Somewhere in the distance, you can hear the sound of horses on the road. Maybe it's just travellers, or maybe it's messengers carrying word of the growing resistance from village to village. Either way, you pull your wool blanket tighter and listen to the night sounds of medieval Britain, the sounds of a world on the edge of something big, something unprecedented, something that could change everything. Your muscles relax completely now, sinking into the rhythm of breath and heartbeat and the soft crackling of the dying fire as the cottage settles into the quiet that comes before the storm. The morning comes too soon, like it always does when you're a peasant. But today feels different. There's a buzz in the air, voices carrying across the village fields before dawn. Something's happening. You stumble outside to see what the commotion is about, and there's your neighbour, practically bouncing with excitement. "They did it," he says, grinning. "The bastards actually did it." Did what? Essex, the whole bloody county's in revolt, threw out the tax collectors, chased off the soldiers, the whole lot, and it's spreading. Kent's joining in, Suffolk too. You feel your heart start beating faster. This is it. This is what everyone's been whispering about, planning for, dreaming about. The peasants are finally standing up, but along with the excitement comes fear, real fear, because you know what happens to people who rebel against authority in medieval England. You know about the giblets, the hangings, the heads on spikes as warnings to others. Still, as you go about your morning routine, feeding the animals, banking the fire, breaking your fast, you can't shake the feeling that everything is about to change. Your wife looks at you with worried eyes. You're not thinking of joining them, are you? You don't answer right away. How do you explain that feeling in your chest, that mixture of hope and terror? How do you explain that for the first time in your life, it feels like maybe, just maybe, things could actually get better? I don't know, you say finally, but I'm tired of this. Aren't you tired of this? She sighs, a sound that contains years of exhaustion, years of watching children go hungry while you hand over half your crops to people who've never missed a meal. I'm tired, she admits. But I'm also scared. You shift, finding a more comfortable position as the weight of that conversation settles around you. Fear and hope mixed together like smoke and morning mist. Throughout the day, more news trickles in. The rebels aren't just angry peasants with pitchforks. They're organised. They've got leaders, plans, strategy. They're not just burning random buildings. They're targeting specific things: court records, tax rolls, the legal documents that keep peasants tied to their lords. It's brilliant, really. You can't oppress people if you don't have paperwork proving they belong to you. And the rebels are being smart about it in other ways too. They're not just destroying everything in sight. When they took over Canterbury, they didn't burn down the cathedral. Instead, they appointed a humble monk as the new archbishop and held a service promising death to traitors. They're using the same religious language that's been used to keep them down, but turning it around. The message is clear. They're not against God or the church. They're against corruption, against the people who've twisted religion into a tool for oppression. Word comes that they've freed John Ball from prison, the preacher who's been going around asking uncomfortable questions about equality and social justice. Now he's free and he's with the rebels, and his voice is going to reach a lot more people. By afternoon, you're hearing estimates of how many people have joined the revolt. Thousands, tens of thousands, maybe more. This isn't just a few angry villagers anymore. This is a movement, and they're all heading for London. You pause in your work, leaning on your hoe, and try to imagine it. Thousands of peasants marching on the capital city, demanding to speak to the king himself, demanding justice, fair treatment, an end to serfdom. It's either the bravest thing you've ever heard of or the most foolish, probably both. Your breathing slows as you consider the magnitude of what's happening, the courage it must take to leave your village, your family, your safety, and march into the unknown. That evening the decision makes itself. A messenger arrives in your village, not a government messenger, but one of the rebels, a young man with dirt under his fingernails and fire in his eyes. "We're gathering at Blackheath," he says to the crowd that's formed around him, "south of London. Wat Tyler's there, John Ball's there. We're going to present our demands to the king. We're going to end this system once and for all." He lists the demands, and your heart pounds as you hear them. An end to serfdom, fair wages for all workers, reduction in taxes, removal of the corrupt officials who've been bleeding the country dry. "Who's with us?" he asks. The silence stretches for a long moment. This is the moment of choice. Stay safe, keep your head down, hope things get better on their own, or risk everything for a chance at real change. One by one, hands go up. Men and women, young and old. Not everyone. Some are too scared, some have too much to lose, some just don't believe it can work. But enough. More than enough. Your hand goes up too. The next morning, you're walking south with about 30 other people from your village and the surrounding area. You've left your ox with your wife, taken only what food and tools you can carry. The animals will be fine for a few days, and if things go well, maybe you'll come back to a world where they can't be taken away from you on a lord's whim. The road to London is full of people, not just peasants, craftsmen, small traders, village priests, even a few minor nobles who are fed up with the corruption in government. This is bigger than just a peasant revolt. This is people from all walks of life saying they've had enough. You fall into step with a group from the next county over. They've got stories that make your blood boil. Lords demanding extra labour during harvest time. Priests selling indulgences to people who can barely afford bread. Tax collectors taking more than they're supposed to and pocketing the difference. But they've also got stories of resistance, villages that banded together to refuse payment, lords who found their barns mysteriously catching fire, small acts of defiance that are adding up to something much bigger. As you walk, you start to understand something that maybe you never understood before. You're not alone. The things that make you angry, the injustices that keep you awake at night, the dreams of a better life for your children, they're not just your problems. They're shared by thousands of people walking this same road. You adjust your pack, settling into the rhythm of the march. Your legs find their pace. The conversation flows around you like a river. Someone starts singing and others join in. Not a religious hymn or a work song, but something new, something about freedom, about justice, about the rights of common people. The melody carries across the fields, and you can hear other groups of marchers picking it up. It's intoxicating, this feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. For your whole life you've felt powerless, subject to the whims of lords and priests and kings. But here, walking with thousands of others toward London, you feel powerful, you feel like you matter. The landscape changes as you get closer to the capital. More villages, more traffic on the roads, more signs of wealth and commerce, but also more signs of poverty. Beggars by the roadside, children in rags, the smell of too many people living too close together. London, when you finally see it in the distance, is overwhelming. You've never seen so many buildings, so much smoke, so much activity. The city sprawls along both sides of the Thames, a maze of streets and alleys and markets that seems to go on forever. And somewhere in that maze is the king, Richard II, only 14 years old, but still the most powerful person in England. The person who could, if he chose to, end serfdom with the stroke of a pen, free every peasant in England, create a world where people are paid fairly for their work, if he chose to. You settle back into the march, muscles moving in steady rhythm, breathing easy and natural as the great city grows larger ahead of you. The rebels have set up camp at Blackheath, a large open area south of the city. When you arrive, you're amazed at what you see. It's like a temporary city. Thousands of people, tents and shelters, cooking fires, organised groups discussing strategy. And everywhere, the energy of hope mixed with determination. These people have left everything behind for a chance at change. They've risked their lives, their families, their futures on the belief that things can be better. Wat Tyler is easy to spot. He's the one everyone's listening to, the one who commands attention without having to shout for it. He's not particularly tall or imposing physically, but there's something about him that makes you want to follow where he leads. He's talking to a group of Kent rebels when you arrive, explaining the plan. They're going to demand a meeting with the king. They're going to present their demands peacefully, reasonably. They're not here to overthrow the monarchy. They're here to reform it. "We're not rebels," Tyler says, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd. "We're loyal subjects of the king, but we will not be slaves. We will not work for nothing while others live in luxury. We will not watch our children starve while lords feast." The crowd murmurs agreement. This is the message that brought you all here. Not hatred of the king, but love of justice. Not desire for chaos, but hunger for fairness. John Ball is there too, and when he speaks, it's like listening to thunder. His words roll across the crowd, powerful and righteous. He talks about the brotherhood of all people under God, about how the current system isn't just unfair, it's sinful, it's a perversion of God's will. When Adam delved and Eve span, he says, his voice rising, who was then the gentleman? The crowd roars its approval. This simple question cuts right to the heart of everything. If all people are equal in God's eyes, why should some be born to rule while others are born to serve? A yawn escapes as you listen, the day's march catching up with you. But it's a satisfied yawn, the kind that comes after good work well done. The evening is spent in preparation. Weapons are checked, not swords and armour like knights would carry, but the tools of working people, hammers, axes, knives, bows that are used for hunting, scythes that cut grain, but there's also talk of keeping things peaceful. Tyler and the other leaders are clear about this. They're not here to start a war. They're here to demand justice. Violence should be a last resort. Still, everyone knows that violence might be necessary. The powerful don't give up their privileges willingly. They might need to be convinced. As night falls over the camp, you wrap yourself in your cloak and lie down on the hard ground. It's not comfortable, certainly not as comfortable as your straw mattress back home, but there's something deeply satisfying about it. You're sleeping under the stars with thousands of other people who share your dreams of a better world. Around you, the camp settles into the quiet rhythms of night, conversations dying down to whispers, fires burning low, the sound of thousands of people breathing in sleep, all dreaming the same dreams. You shift, finding a position that doesn't put a rock in your back. The ground is hard, but somehow welcoming. Tomorrow, you'll enter London. Tomorrow, you'll demand justice from the king himself. Tomorrow, everything might change. The night air is cool and clean, a relief after the smoke and closeness of your cottage. Above you, stars wheel across the sky in patterns your grandfather taught you to read, the same stars that shine down on lords in their castles and peasants in their fields. God stars shining on all people equally, just like John Ball says it should be. Your breathing deepens and slows, matching the rhythm of the sleeping camp around you. Somewhere in the distance a nightbird calls. Closer by, someone's snoring softly. The sounds of people at peace, despite everything that tomorrow might bring. Tomorrow you'll cross London Bridge and enter the greatest city in England. Tomorrow you'll stand before the Tower of London where the King waits. Tomorrow you'll be part of something that could reshape the world. But tonight, you rest. Tonight, you sleep the sleep of people who found their courage and chosen to use it. Tonight, you dream of a world where your children might be free. Your muscles relax completely, settling into the earth that connects you to every peasant who's ever worked the land, ever dreamed of something better, ever dared to stand up and say enough is enough. The night wraps around you like a blanket, warm with the presence of your fellow dreamers, secure in the knowledge that you're not alone anymore. You wake to the sound of thousands of people stirring at once. The camp at Blackheath is coming alive as the sun rises over London in the distance. Cooking fires are being lit, bread is being shared, and everywhere you look there's the quiet energy of people preparing for something momentous. You stretch, working out the kinks from sleeping on hard ground. Your back aches, but it's the good kind of ache that comes from purpose. Around you, men and women are checking their weapons, adjusting their clothes, sharing what food they have. There's something beautiful about it, actually. These people have never met before yesterday, but they're sharing their bread, their water, their cloaks with perfect strangers, because they're not strangers, really. They're all peasants. They all know what it's like to work until your hands bleed for someone else's profit. What Tyler is already up and moving through the camp, talking to the various groups, making sure everyone understands the plan. He stops near where you're sitting and you get a closer look at the man who's leading this whole thing. He's probably in his 40s, weathered by years of physical work. His hands are calloused, his clothes are simple wool and linen. Nothing about him screams leader except for his eyes. Those are the eyes of someone who's thought long and hard about what needs to be done and has the will to do it. Today we go to London, he says to your group. Today we demand justice from the king himself. But remember, we're not bandits, we're not criminals, we're English subjects asking for our rights. We keep our discipline, we keep our dignity, and we keep our focus on what we came here to do. Someone asks what happens if the king refuses to see them. Tyler's smile is grim. Then we make it impossible for him to ignore us. You take a deep breath, feeling the morning air fill your lungs. Clean air, free air. Whatever happens today, you're no longer just taking orders and hoping for the best. You're acting. You're choosing your own path. The march toward London begins around mid-morning. Thousands of people streaming along the roads, all converging on London Bridge. You've never seen anything like it. The organisation is impressive. Tyler and the other leaders have groups arranged by county, each with their own banners, their own marshals keeping order. This isn't a mob, this is an army of working people who've decided they deserve better. As you get closer to the city, you start to see Londoners lining the roads. Some look scared, and you can understand why. Thousands of armed peasants marching on your city would be intimidating, but others look hopeful, even excited. Because London has its own poor people, its own workers being squeezed by the same system that's squeezing you. Craftsmen paying too much in taxes, labourers working for wages that don't keep up with the cost of bread, apprentices bound to masters who treat them like property. Some of these London workers fall in with the march. They've been waiting for something like this, some way to make their voices heard. By the time you reach London Bridge, your army has grown by thousands more. London Bridge is a sight to behold. It's not just a bridge, it's almost a city in itself, lined with shops and houses, people living and working right over the Thames. The river flows beneath you, dark and swift, carrying ships and barges loaded with goods from all over Europe. This is the centre of English commerce, English power, English wealth, and today it belongs to the peasants. Your shoulders relax as you settle into the rhythm of the crossing, thousands of feet on stone, the sound echoing off the buildings that line the bridge. The city that opens up before you is overwhelming. Narrow streets packed with people, buildings rising 3 and 4 stories high. The smell of cooking food and human waste and wood smoke all mixed together. It's loud, chaotic, alive in a way that your village never is. But it's also clearly divided. The fine stone houses of the wealthy stand next to the ramshackle wooden buildings of the poor. The contrast is stark, unavoidable. Here's wealth beyond anything you've ever imagined, sitting right next to poverty, as grinding as anything in the countryside. The rebels know where they're going. They've planned this. Some groups head toward the Tower of London, where the king is holed up with his advisors. Others spread through the city, looking for specific targets. The Savoy Palace is one of those targets. It belongs to John of Gaunt, the king's uncle, one of the most hated men in England. He's the one peasants blame for the poll tax, for the corruption in government, for the wars that drain the treasury while people starve. Unfortunately for him, John of Gaunt is in Scotland right now, but his palace is still a symbol of everything that's wrong with the system. As you watch, rebels stream into the magnificent building and begin methodically destroying it. But here's the thing that impresses you. They're not looting. They're not stealing the gold and silver and fine cloth. They're burning it all, making a statement that this isn't about getting rich. This is about justice. One rebel finds a chest full of gold coins and throws them into the Thames rather than pocket them. "We're not thieves," he shouts. "We're reformers." The message is clear. The rebels want to change the system, not just grab what they can from it. A comfortable sigh escapes as you watch this display of principle, this commitment to something bigger than personal gain. By afternoon, word comes that the king has agreed to meet with representatives of the rebels. Not Wat Tyler and the other leaders, they're too dangerous, too radical, but a delegation of more moderate rebels, people the court thinks they can negotiate with. The meeting is set for Mile End. outside the city walls. Tyler decides to go along, but he's suspicious. This feels like a trick, a way to divide the rebels and deal with them separately. He's right to be suspicious. While the meeting at Mile End is going on, with the king making vague promises to consider the rebels' demands, another group of rebels storms the Tower of London. This is where the real power lies. Not just the king, he's a 14-year-old boy, after all, but his advisors, the men who actually run the country, the men who created the poll tax, who defend serfdom, who profit from the suffering of working people. The tower falls quickly. The rebels know exactly who they're looking for. Simon Sudbury, the Archbishop of Canterbury and Chancellor of England. Robert Hales, the Treasurer. These are the men behind the policies that have driven peasants to desperation. They're found cowering in the chapel, praying for salvation that isn't coming. The rebels drag them out to Tower Hill and execute them on the spot. Their heads are cut off and stuck on pikes, then paraded through the city. It's brutal, shocking, final, but it's also justice, at least in the eyes of the rebels. These men have caused the deaths of countless peasants through their policies. They've enforced a system that treats human beings like property. They've gotten rich off other people's suffering. Now they're paying the price. You shift position, finding a comfortable spot to settle as the weight of that justice settles around you like a heavy blanket. The king, meanwhile, has returned to the tower to find his chief advisors dead and the rebels still in control of London. He's trapped, powerless, dependent on peasants for his very survival. It's a complete reversal of the natural order. The people who normally have no say in anything are now calling the shots. The people who normally take orders are now giving them. For one brief, shining moment, the world has turned upside down. That evening, as you sit around a fire in a London inn that's been taken over by rebels, you listen to the plans for tomorrow. Tyler isn't satisfied with the king's vague promises at Mile End. He wants another meeting, a real negotiation with specific concessions spelled out clearly. The meeting is set for Smithfield, an open area just outside the city walls. It's where they normally hold cattle markets, but tomorrow it's going to host the most important political meeting in English history. Tyler knows it's dangerous. The king's people are probably planning something, some way to end this rebellion once and for all. But Tyler also knows that this might be the only chance peasants will ever have to demand real change. Miss this opportunity, and it might be generations before another one comes along. "We've come this far," he says to the group around the fire. "We've taken London. We've removed the king's corrupt advisors. We've shown that peasants can't be ignored. Tomorrow we finish what we started." The list of demands is impressive. An end to serfdom throughout England, fair wages for all workers, reduction in taxes, redistribution of church lands to the poor, a general pardon for all rebels. It's a complete restructuring of English society. It's everything peasants have dreamed of for generations, and tomorrow they're going to demand it from the king himself. As the evening wears on, the excitement in the air is palpable. People are sharing stories, singing songs, planning what they'll do when they get back to their villages as free men and women. There's a giddiness to it, a sense that anything is possible. But there's also an undercurrent of tension. Everyone knows tomorrow is crucial. Everyone knows the king's people are planning something. Everyone knows this could all go very wrong very quickly. You wrap yourself in your cloak and try to find a comfortable position on the floor of the inn. Outside, you can hear the sounds of London at night, voices in the streets, horses clattering on cobblestones, the distant sound of singing from other groups of rebels celebrating their victory. Your breathing slows naturally as you listen to these sounds of a city transformed, a world temporarily turned upside down. Tomorrow will bring Smithfield. Tomorrow will bring the final confrontation between Wat Tyler and the king. Tomorrow will determine whether this rebellion succeeds or fails, whether peasants win their freedom or pay for their audacity with their lives. But tonight, you rest in the knowledge that you've already accomplished something extraordinary. You've shown that peasants don't have to accept injustice. You've proven that working people can organise, can fight back, can demand their rights. Whatever happens tomorrow, that knowledge will spread. Other peasants in other places will hear about what happened in London in 1381. They'll know that resistance is possible, that change can happen, that the powerful are not as powerful as they pretend to be. The inn grows quiet as rebels settle down for the night. Somewhere in the distance, church bells ring the hours, the same churches whose wealth the rebels want redistributed, whose priests have been preaching submission while living in luxury. You shift slightly, getting more comfortable, muscles relaxing into the rhythm of rest. Around you, hundreds of other rebels sleep the sleep of people who found their courage and used it well. Your eyelids grow heavy as you think about your village, your family, your straw mattress back home. By this time tomorrow, you might be heading back there as a free man, or you might not be heading back at all. But either way, you've lived through something remarkable. You've been part of the moment when ordinary people stood up and said enough, when peasants demanded to be treated like human beings, when the impossible suddenly seemed possible, if only for a few bright, dangerous days in the summer of 1381. The warmth of the inn, the presence of your fellow rebels, the soft sounds of people breathing in sleep, it all combines to create a cocoon of peace around you, even as tomorrow's uncertainties wait just beyond the dawn. The morning of June 15th dawns grey and cool over London. You wake early, along with most of the other rebels. Today is the day. Today everything gets decided. Smithfield is already bustling with activity when you arrive. It's a large, open space normally used for livestock markets, but today it's hosting something much more significant. Thousands of rebels have gathered, arranged in loose groups, all eyes focused on the centre of the field where a small pavilion has been set up. The King's party arrives around noon. Richard II, still just 14 years old but trying to project the authority of his position, he's surrounded by his remaining advisers, including William Walworth, the Mayor of London. These men have spent the last few days watching their world turned upside down, watching peasants execute their colleagues, watching their power slip away. They're scared, and scared people do dangerous things. Wat Tyler rides out to meet the king. He's alone except for one man carrying the rebel banner. It's a powerful image, the peasant leader approaching the boy king as an equal, ready to negotiate the future of England. You shift your weight, settling in to watch this historic moment unfold. Your breathing is steady, calm, even though your heart is racing. Tyler dismounts and approaches the king with confidence, not the servile bowing and scraping that peasants are supposed to show to royalty. He greets Richard as one leader greeting another, as an equal, and then he begins to present his demands, not requests, demands. An immediate end to serfdom throughout England. Every peasant to be declared free, able to work where they choose, for wages they negotiate themselves. All land rents to be reduced to 4 pence per acre, a huge reduction that would leave peasants with much more of what they produce, the complete redistribution of church property, the vast lands owned by monasteries and bishops to be divided among the poor, a reduction in the number of bishops. The church hierarchy has grown fat and corrupt, more concerned with wealth than souls. The removal of all remaining corrupt officials from government. These aren't small reforms. This is a complete restructuring of English society. This is the end of feudalism as it's existed for centuries. The king listens. What else can he do? He's surrounded by thousands of armed peasants who've just proven they can take London whenever they want. His army is scattered across France and Scotland. He has no choice but to negotiate. "I will grant what I can fairly grant," Richard says carefully. It's a diplomatic non-answer, and Tyler knows it. The peasant leader's face hardens. He's not here for vague promises and royal double talk. He's here for concrete commitments. Tyler calls for a drink of water to rinse out his mouth. It's a casual gesture, but in the context of a formal meeting with the king, it's shocking. You don't just casually refresh yourself in the presence of royalty. You don't treat the king like he's some village elder you're haggling with over grain prices. But that's exactly what Tyler is doing. He's making it clear that he doesn't recognise the divine right of kings, doesn't accept that Richard is his natural superior. In Tyler's eyes, they're just two men trying to work out a deal. The king's party is scandalised. This is exactly the kind of uppity peasant behaviour they've been dreading. One of Richard's men shouts out that Tyler is the greatest thief and robber in Kent, and that's when everything goes wrong. Your muscles tense as you sense the shift in the air, the moment when negotiation turns to violence. Tyler reaches for his dagger, furious at the insult, but William Walworth, the Mayor of London, is ready for this. He's been waiting for an excuse, a reason to end this rebellion once and for all. Walworth draws his sword and strikes Tyler in the neck. It's a deep cut, blood spurting everywhere. As Tyler staggers, one of the king's men runs him through with his sword, then another strike and another. Wat Tyler, the leader of the greatest peasant rebellion in English history, falls to the ground at Smithfield, bleeding his life out onto the dirt where cattle are normally bought and sold. For a moment, absolute silence. Thousands of peasants staring in shock at their fallen leader, thousands of weapons in peasant hands, and the king standing practically defenceless in the middle of them. This is the moment when the rebellion could turn into a massacre. This is when the peasants could cut down the entire royal party and declare England a republic. This is when everything could change forever. But then, in one of the most remarkable moments in English history, the 14-year-old king shows exactly why his family has held power for so long. Richard spurs his horse forward, riding directly toward the mass of angry, grieving peasants. Instead of fleeing, instead of cowering, he rides right into the crowd that could tear him apart in seconds. "Sirs," he calls out, his young voice carrying clearly across Smithfield, "would you kill your king? I am your rightful captain, and I will be your leader. Let all those who love me follow me." It's audacious, it's brilliant, it's completely insane, and somehow it works. The peasants, shocked by Tyler's death, confused by this display of royal courage, follow the king out of Smithfield, away from the scene of their leader's murder, away from the moment when they might have changed history forever. You feel yourself being swept along with the crowd, your feet moving almost without conscious thought, following the young king who's just turned potential victory into certain defeat. As the crowd moves away from Smithfield, Walworth returns with armed men from the city. They surround the dispersed and leaderless peasants. The rebellion that seemed so powerful just hours ago suddenly looks very vulnerable. Richard, now safe with his armed escort, shows his true colours. The promises he made at Mile End, the concessions he seemed willing to grant, all forgotten. "Rustics you are, and rustics you shall remain," he tells the peasants. "You will remain in bondage, not as before, but incomparably harsher. It's over. The dream of freedom, of fair wages, of an end to serfdom, it dies there in the shadow of Smithfield, along with Wat Tyler. Your shoulders sag as the full weight of the defeat settles on you. The hope that had carried you from your village to London, that had sustained you through days of danger and possibility, slowly drains away. The rebellion collapses quickly after that. Without Tyler's leadership, without the momentum of success, the peasants become just what their enemies always said they were, a mob of rustics with no real power. Some rebels slip away in the confusion, heading back to their villages to hope they won't be identified and punished. Others are caught and executed on the spot. The lucky ones are merely imprisoned. You manage to escape in the chaos, making your way back across London Bridge and onto the roads leading home. But the England you're returning to is not the England you left. The authorities are furious, humiliated by how close the rebellion came to success. They're going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Over the next few months, the retribution is savage. Hundreds of rebels are tracked down and executed. Their heads are displayed on poles throughout the countryside as warnings. Royal commissions travel from village to village, rooting out anyone who showed sympathy for the rebellion. The charters that Richard granted at Mile End, promising reforms, all cancelled. Serfdom continues as before. The poll tax is quietly abandoned, too dangerous to try collecting it again. But the underlying system remains unchanged. But here's the thing. Even though the rebellion failed, even though Tyler died and the peasants were crushed, something important happened at Smithfield in 1381. Something that couldn't be undone, no matter how many heads ended up on polls. For the first time in English history, ordinary working people had organised on a massive scale. They had taken London, executed the king's advisers, and demanded fundamental changes to society. They had shown that the powerful weren't as powerful as they pretended to be. That knowledge spread to other countries, other peasants, other rebels. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381 became a model for resistance movements across Europe. It showed that change was possible, even if it was dangerous. And in England itself, things did gradually improve for peasants, not because of royal generosity, but because the Black Death had created labour shortages that gave workers leverage. Lords who couldn't find enough peasants to work their land had to offer better terms to keep the ones they had. Serfdom didn't disappear overnight, but it began a slow decline that would eventually make it obsolete. The rigid social hierarchy of medieval England started to crack, creating opportunities for people to rise based on their abilities rather than their birth. You make it back to your village, back to your straw mattress and your smoky cottage and your strips of land. Your wife is relieved to see you alive. Your children ask where you've been, what you've seen. You tell them about London, about the rebellion, about Wat Tyler and the dream of freedom that died at Smithfield. But you also tell them something else. You tell them that peasants don't have to accept injustice, that working people can organise, can fight back, can demand their rights, that the world can change, even if it doesn't change quickly or easily. Your breathing grows slower and deeper as you settle back into the familiar rhythms of peasant life. The dawn to dusk work, the seasonal cycles, the endless struggle to feed your family and pay your dues. But it's different now. You've seen what's possible. You've tasted freedom, even if only briefly. You've stood with thousands of other working people and demanded a better world. And that knowledge, that memory, that's something they can never take away from you. The cottage grows quiet around you. The fire burns low. Your family sleeps peacefully, secure in their beds despite everything that's happened. Outside, the sounds of the medieval night, owls calling, dogs barking in distant villages, the whisper of wind through thatch. These are the sounds of a world that seems unchanged, but isn't. A world where peasants have proven they don't have to suffer in silence. A world where the impossible has been shown to be merely difficult. Your eyelids grow heavy now, the weight of exhaustion and memory pulling you towards sleep, real sleep, deep sleep, the sleep of someone who's lived through history and helped to make it. As you drift toward dreams, you think about your children, about the world they'll inherit. It may not be the free world you fought for at Smithfield, but it's a world where they'll know that change is possible, that justice is worth fighting for, that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they choose to use it. The straw mattress beneath you feels softer now, more welcoming. The wool blanket wraps around you like an embrace. The smoky air of the cottage becomes as gentle as morning mist. Your breathing slows to match the rhythm of sleep itself. Deep, peaceful, restorative sleep. Sleep that heals the wounds of defeat and nurtures the seeds of future hope. Sleep that connects you to every peasant who ever dreamed of freedom, every worker who ever demanded fairness, every ordinary person who ever stood up to power and said, "Enough." Sleep comes easily now, carrying you into dreams where Wat Tyler still lives, where peasants are free, where the rebellions succeeded and changed everything. Dreams where justice prevails and working people get the respect they deserve. And maybe, in some small way, those dreams are preparing for a future where such things might actually come to pass, where the courage shown at Smithfield in 1381 will finally bear fruit in a world more fair, more just, more free than anything those brave rebels could have imagined. Your eyelids close completely now, your body sinking into the deep rest it needs and deserves. Sleep fills the cottage like morning light, gentle and warm and full of possibility. Sleep that says this story is ending, but the larger story, the story of human dignity and the struggle for justice, that story continues. Drift now into peaceful sleep, into dreams where peasants and kings are equal, where no one goes hungry while others feast, where every person is valued for who they are rather than who they serve. Sleep now, sleep deep, sleep well. The rebellion may have failed, but the dream lives on. In your rest, in your dreams, in the quiet confidence that someday, somehow, the world can be better than it is. Sleep now and let that dream carry you through the night.